Hi, welcome. This is Parmdeep Videsha. I'm a full-time property investor based in Leicester in the East Midlands, and I run a development business. I have a property portfolio, and I'm a partner in a letting agency, all locally based in the East Midlands. I love to share what I've learned in property, so alongside my local property business, I've also been running workshops since 2003, and I've educated over 10,000 people at different events all over the UK. I've also written a best-selling course called Success Through Property, which reveals how to find below market value properties. Now I'm really excited because, as you probably know, we're running an event on the 18th and 19th of November called the Underground Investors Summit. And it's a non-profit event raising money for very worthy causes. And what we've done is we've gotten some of the best, most respected UK property experts together. And what makes this event different is it's all about them revealing what they're doing themselves in their particular niches. So we've got people doing development, service departments, rent to rents, lease options, standard buy to let, development into HMOs and apartment blocks. We've got Rory doing finance, a huge mixture of different strategies. But rather than just getting the theoretical behind it, we're actually going to reveal to you how it works in practice, the paperwork. How do you raise the money? How do you find deals? How do you actually structure them? How did the investors structure their last or their most recent, successful deals? And that's what you're going to get at this project and this event. Nothing's held back. It's very, very practical-led event. So I'm really excited to be doing it, and I've gotten together some really, really well-known, respected property experts, and Rory's one of them. I've known Rory now. It must be at least 10 years now. I've been kicking around since 2003. I think actually, well, welcome to the call, Rory.
Good afternoon, Steve.
Hiya. Just trying to think, when did we first meet? It was a long while ago. I don't remember.
Yeah, you've thrown me. I started in property in 2005, and I think it may have been 2007. I think I'm not 100% sure. Been a long time.
It has been a long time. I think I came across you on the internet before I met you on the forum.
Yeah, I mean, we started doing a lot of the old no money down when it was very easy to use a daylight bridge.
Yes.
And for those who are old enough, long in the tooth, would have recalled that you could do funding with Mortgage Express, which made life easy for buy-to-let investors, and that's how we started, really.
And you've got a corporate background, right? So you had a really good corporate career.
Yes, I worked in the city for a number of organisations, but what I always tried to do is to really stop and look for opportunity. So for those of you who really are old, I started my career actually in sales for a company called NCR. And when you get money out of an ATM or a cash point machine, it's highly likely the NCR probably would make that machine.
Oh, National Cash Register.
Yeah, that's where I sort of cut my teeth in sales, really. And in those dizzy days of the late 80s, we were selling products that don't exist anymore. Fax paper, telex paper, and floppy disks. and so I moved on from that, then actually worked for a company called Extel, which was the old Exchange Telegraph company. And again, you used to be able to walk around the city and you could see manhole covers which had the Exchange Telegraph company on the manhole covers.
Yeah.
And they were the first provider of ticker tape news.
Right.
It's amazing history, and I joined that company in '88, and they were 100 years old then.
Wow!
And I moved on from that. I was working with fund management companies, stockbrokers, etc., and I then moved into IT. And for me, it's always been about to stop, have a think about what's going on in the world right now. Are you in the right space? Can you take advantage of it? So I moved into technology. I moved into satellite tracking of vehicles using telematics years before it really. Now if you've got a teenager who wants to insure a car, you need a black box. And we were pitching that to insurance companies in around 2000, 2001.
Right.
And they had no interest in tracking kids in cars, whereas now you can't get insurance without essentially a tracking device if you're a youngster. But and then I set up a boutique IT consultancy. We sold that and then started to do some property stuff, and essentially mainly lending our own money on daylight bridges and a little bit. And then we broker a lot of stuff as well, the bigger ticket items. But I have an HMO portfolio. I've got some JV partners I work with on development projects. And also now, again, looking to diversify actually projects outside of property, but are really high cash flow that are profitable, linked to, again, emerging industries. So eco, recycling.
Yep.
And that's a new initiative on a project I've been working on for about 6 months now.
Great. So your product is essentially money from your lending point of view. And so, well, not just money. Obviously, it's all the expertise and everything that goes around it. So, and I've always known you as the bridging, from your bridging point of view, the bridging business that you have. So fast money, and you've always been very, from what I've seen, very reliable and respected in that space. And tell us about some of the projects that you've been involved in. I mean, let's look at two, for example, for people who are listening and thinking, right, how does a JV work in practice? From your perspective, maybe run us through a couple of projects.
Sure. Okay. So no, you're absolutely right. So our brand is closedbridgingfinance.com, and that's been running now since 2006. So in the early days, it was a simple daylight sort of one-day bridge using Mortgage Express. And then obviously when the whole crash happened, we moved on to lending money for longer terms. So normally on a bridge, it would be, say, from 1 day up to maybe 12 months. So I thought, why don't we start off with a project that we funded in about the last 18 months or so. And an investor came to me and said, look, I've got a great opportunity to buy a detached property, get some planning, split it into 2 dwellings, give it a major refurb, and then sell it. And we, as a bridger, we lend our own money, but we do broker a lot as well now, because the bridging is essentially, the vanilla bridging rates are very low. So we look for projects that are a little bit more complicated to fund, or the investor would like a bit more leverage, so therefore they'll pay a premium for the ability to leverage more than one project. So this was a project in Sheffield, and I think the key learning that we had, or the investor had, we worked out that we were quite happy to fund I think actually we were funding all of the purchase price, and we were funding the conversion, but the rates were quite high, naturally, because we're taking nearly all of the risk. We understood what needed to be done with regards to planning. Long story short, planning, the investor had not engaged a third-party planning consultant, which I probably would have done. And the process that the local authority had followed, I don't think they'd followed it correctly. And so planning was delayed by about 3 months. Now that had a knock-on effect. So by not using the right expert, the contractor who was hired to do the conversion at a fixed price said, look, we can't wait, we'll move on to another project, come back. So a new contractor had to be sourced, and the price for the conversion went up by 50%.
Right.
So that had a massive impact. So you've added time to the project, 3 months, added additional cost, which also means additional cost on the bridge. And you always get delays anyway, because that's just how these things work. And the net effect being, the client should have had a return of about 239% on the money they were going to put in. They didn't lose money, but they didn't sell in the end. What they decided to do was to refinance with an appropriate lender. So I think both those properties are now HMOs, so houses of multiple occupancy, and they're rented out. They give good cash flow.
Interesting. So in this case, it's a case of knowing where to spend the money, where to actually put those resources. So just a simple learning there for me is knowing which particular experts to engage, and the planning consultant seemed to be a key one there.
Absolutely. I would say, I have a JV partner that I work with. When we go and look at new projects, whether it's an office to resi conversion, the go-to person, first of all, is our planning consultant. Because they'll tell us what we can and what we can't do.
Yes.
And if they say no, we'll listen to them. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And
so and it's worth spending that money. Absolutely, it's worth spending the money. If you've never done it, don't try and be an expert trying to play the planning game on your own. In my opinion, and certainly when I've worked with clients who do this as a career, that they will pay for the right expert.
Yeah, very good. Tell us about another project.
Yeah, so why don't we flip this on its head and take a different project that a client had, East Midlands, came to me and said, look, Rory, we understand the local development plan for this particular area, and we've spotted an opportunity where there's a warehouse. The warehouse could be bought for about £120,000. And we said, okay, so tell me exactly what you plan to do. Pardon the pun, but it was to get planning consent for a 46-bed student HMO, so House of Multiple Occupancy. Mm-hmm. And it was quite easy to secure the site. The issue was getting the planning.
Yep.
And the key component was, again, using the right planning consultancy who understood the local development plan and the council's desire, in this case, to move students into town. So the site got bought for about 120,000. This particular investor that I work with would have always kept one property unencumbered, i.e. no mortgage. So we were able to lend on the site, plus take the other unencumbered property as additional security. And actually, I think out of the 120,000 buy price, the bridging loan was a few pounds short of 115,000. So it's like a 95% plus gearing.
Yeah.
So not much money in the deal. So we were happy with that. He cracked on to obtain planning, which he did. And then we worked with him to get the development funding to take us out, so we can get cheaper development finance, and then built the 48-bed student HMO that generates about £300,000 a year in income and is worth well over £3 million. So once it was built, the equity was at least £1 million plus on day one. The key learning there: do not try and do this on your own. Hire the best people. It's the best planning consultancy. Hire the best contractors to do the work and manage the project for you. And that's exactly what the client did. And that was a step up from just having single lets, HMOs, and then going to this level. And now he only operates at the bigger level, all by following new processes.
I'm not surprised with numbers like that.
Yeah.
So tell me a bit about, you mentioned when we were speaking previously that a lot of people don't really understand how they can go about raising joint venture finance or getting joint venture partners on board. And there's all sorts of rules and regulations that people don't really understand. So can you walk us through some of the pitfalls that you see people kind of falling into that they shouldn't?
Yeah, I mean, it's a whole bunch of things which I will cover at the summit on the 18th, 19th of November. But I think the key thing is understanding how do you not lose your shirt when you're borrowing or lending money? And there are some specific rules and regs. The things that I'd like to cover is, well, let's just drill it down, keep it nice and simple. What's the best practice? Let's look at understanding the difference between debt and the difference between debt and equity in projects. So that's where you're either borrowing money or giving away a stake in the enterprise. But I think the key thing is you do really need to understand that you cannot stand in front of an audience and pitch profit share if they're the wrong audience. You can get yourself
even online forums and things.
Absolutely, you cannot do that. You couldn't stand in a room and say, I'll give a 10% return on 100,000 for X. Mm-hmm. That is just not allowed. And the FCA rules are quite clear on that with the legislation that's in place right now. And you'll see that. Most people will see that. If you attend certainly some of the PIN events, and I think the PPN ones as well, that you're just not allowed to stand up in a room now and go pitching. You can have a conversation with somebody, but really you need to understand, are they a high net worth or a sophisticated investor? And if they are, and you can get the right certification, then you can have a conversation with them about the types of funding that's available. Keeping it simple, a lot of what we do, we borrow money from investors because we're borrowing, they're lending. That's nice and simple. Offering profit share is a very different proposition altogether. And a lot of people lose their shirt teeth. They end up speaking to particularly if you were working maybe with someone who may have been an IFA and they offer you some wacky profit share scheme, and you end up losing 50 to 100K. You might find yourself filling in a form on the Financial Services Compensation Scheme website and going through that process. and it's painful. And so you want to make sure you do as much due diligence up front. If it sounds too good to be true, it probably is.
Yeah. Well, I suppose there'll be some people listening to this who think, well, who's ever going to find out if I go and do this? But I suppose the risk there is if you do a project with somebody and it doesn't go to plan, they always have that as a fallback. They can always turn around and say, well, this person shouldn't have advertised this to me in the first place. I'm not a sophisticated investor. I can now sue him for damages or her for damages.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Listen, when the sun shines and it's a wonderful, beautiful day, everybody enjoys it. But when you have a cool wind and it's very cold, you're going to look to find someone. If you've lost 50k or 100k, it's your life savings. Believe me, there are enough litigation solicitors out there who will happily work with you, and rightfully so.
Yeah.
You know, I think it is the responsibility of the person pitching the project to give as much information. But I think there are a hell of a lot of sharks in property, and you only need a heartbeat. You don't need a lot of qualifications. And if you're unsophisticated, uneducated, because you just don't have the track record or the experience, you don't really know what questions to ask. So we have a blueprint that we try and follow when we borrow money, because we borrow money from investors so that we can lend. And we have a process that we follow, and the information that we're after, and the information that we share. And so I'll pick up on some of that at the summit as well. And just really trying to keep it simple and highlight, these are the things you need to be aware of. I've got a case study of the consequences of a team who basically promised the world with regards to invest money in a foreign exchange scheme. And that went horribly wrong, and none of the money was ever traded in a foreign exchange scheme. It was just a Ponzi scheme.
Who'd have thought a foreign exchange scheme could go wrong? That's me being sarcastic.
I know. But, when someone's offering you some crazy returns and you start to receive those returns, but then it all dries up after 6 months. Yeah. So, I've got a case study there that I'd like to share. It's not property, but actually it came out of people who were in property. And we'll just look at some simple blueprint that you can follow if you're looking to work with someone.
Yeah. No, that's really valuable. Sorry, mate.
Yep. So that's what I'd look to do. Also, I'd like to just share some case studies, and we've just talked about a couple here.
Yeah.
Throw a few more in on the day, and I guess if I've got about an hour in total to speak, there'll be some time for some Q&A. You can ask me any question. The people who work with me, I'm not standing up doing the glitz and the glamour and the marketing. That is not me. What you see is what you get. Blunt, direct. Don't wish to be rude, but I just tell it as it is, because I do see. I always fear for people when you can see it's their life savings and they could be conned, and that horrifies me.
Yes, yeah. Well, I mean, I work with investors too, and I've only put investors into projects where they're absolutely safe. Where I've got way more to risk often than they have, and if I do anything risky, it's with my own money. So I don't want to have that problem where people come back to me and say, well, I didn't get what I expected out of this deal. I'd want them to come back to say, I got more than I expected. Let's do the next deal. And that's how it's worked out. So, thanks very much, Rory. Really appreciate it. And sorry, mate. Yeah.
No, I was going to say, I'm really looking forward to the session. So the summit, it's the 19th of November.
That's right.
Hopefully, I think it's the 18th that I'll talk. And get to meet some new faces, share some ideas, and share the concept of the blueprint, and go through, I think, the case studies, really. Everybody likes the case studies that I go through, because they're real case studies. You can ask me as many questions as you like within the time that's allowed, and I'm there to help, really.
Brilliant. And that's one thing I've always liked about you. You've always been very open. Not everybody is, especially in your field, in the financing field. So, brilliant. If you click on the link below the video, there's a link there where you can get hold of a ticket worth £300 for only £97. So using the link below, if you're listening to this audio, you'll go to a web page where you can download some case studies. I believe, Rory, one of your deals is in there, isn't it, as a case study?
I think so. Yes, I can't remember which one it is now, but I'm sure. Yep. Oh, yes. Actually, it is. Yes, I think it might be one of my HMOs. I need to check. Yeah.
Yes. So you'll get to see one of Rory's case studies, and off the back of that, you can then click a button to see the actual event details and sign up. It'll be in London Heathrow, 18th, 19th November, and like I said, it's the only event where you're going to get experts revealing what they're actually doing in their businesses, the deals that they've done, as Rory said, case studies, and even his blueprint that he uses to raise money. And the best thing is, it's all for a good cause. It's a non-profit event. So come along, meet dozens of fellow property investors, people who've got money, want to invest in you, people with deals who you could work with, and make some new connections in property. So just use the link below to register, and I look forward to seeing you there. Rory, thanks for your time, mate. I look forward to seeing you at the event as well.
Yeah, look forward to it as well. Thank you very much, Poppy. Bye.
Yep, great.